Binger tweeted this, and it reads, Deontay Wilder tells The Athletic he hasn't been informed if the pay-per-view bout with Luis Ortiz will be distributed by Fox or Showtime. However, all indications are that the heavyweight title tilt rematch, November 23rd in Las Vegas, will be a Fox pay-per-view with an announcement on Spence Porter telecast. Deontay Wilder said it doesn't matter to him which network will carry the fight since he's fought on both. Showtime, which has invested heavily in Wilder, hopes to distribute the Ortiz bout. Wilder says he wants the biggest awareness possible. That's Fox, unless CBS steps up. Let's get in our time machine, kids. Let's go back to before DAZN offered Deontay Wilder that $100 million.
Right before.
$20 million of which was supposed to be for that Brazil fight, because you have to remember, they wanted Wilder to have that fight just on their platform as part of a package deal that would have seen him going into two Anthony Joshua fights.
Let's backtrack.
Let's go back to the days and maybe a week or two before that. It was already well known who Deontay Wilder was likely to fight next. It was more or less understood that it's going to be Dominic Breazeale because, well, Tyson Fury had crossed to the top-ranked side of things, and that complicated the situation for their rematch. So it was pretty well known by that time that Tyson Fury, having crossed over to top rank, what that essentially means is that if they do fight, it won't be Wilder's next fight. It won't be then. Maybe they do fight, maybe they don't. But at minimum, he won't be Wilder's next opponent. Enter Dominic Breazeale, who was already named as Wilder's mandatory challenger. At this time, it was understood that Breazeale's going to be the next guy that he fights. And at this time, it was understood that the home for that fight was going to be Showtime.
And everybody was more or less of this understanding. The pros, the pundits, the boxing community at large, they figured, okay, if he's not fighting Fury next, he's going to end up getting his mandatory out of the way. Naturally. So Showtime knows this. And at this time, Showtime more or less has an idea what Wilder stands to make for the fight. They got an idea what they plan on paying this guy. And here comes DAZN, offering Deontay Wilder $100 million, $20 million of which was for that Breazeale fight. $20 million they were offering this guy to have that fight. You know, we know you're going to have that fight. We know that that's going to be your next fight, but here's what we'll do for you. We'll give you $20 million to have that same fight on our platform. We know. As a result of this, Showtime had to up the ante a bit as best as they could, and that's what they did. They did prepare an incentivized package, an improved package for Deontay Wilder to stay right there where he already was. Essentially, DAZN stepping in and offering Deontay Wilder the amount of money that they offered him forced Showtime to give Wilder more money. Oh, granted, not as much as he would have got from DAZN. But still more. Stephan Espinoza himself admitted to Keith Idek that they didn't match DAZN's offer. They didn't give Wilder $20 million for that fight, but they did give him more than what he was already going to get. And it's pretty obvious why. They gave him an improved offer, an improved amount, an incentive to stay on their side of the street because they wanted him and they wanted that Breazeale fight to stay on the Showtime side of the street. And it worked. The fight ended up being there. It did. Wilder didn't take the $20 million from DAZN. That was stupid. Whether you think that was a good or bad idea is besides the point because we know what he did. He stayed right there on Showtime for that fight as a result of receiving that improved offer. But hindsight being 2020, looking at what's happening now, that Wilder's next fight might not even be on Showtime. It might end up being on Fox. And I reiterate, when Fox eats, Showtime doesn't shit. So what I'm wondering the most now is if all those months ago, had Stephan Espinoza known that Wilder's very next fight after that Breazeale fight was going to end up on Fox, had he known that, back then, would he have even bothered to shell out the extra cash to keep Wilder on their side of the street? Would he have even bothered to kick out the extra cash to make sure Wilder doesn't go to DAZN if he would have known that Wilder's going to end up on Fox? I don't think so. I don't think so, because Stephan Espinoza, you got to realize, he don't benefit from that Showtime. They don't benefit from Wilder going to Fox. Maybe Wilder benefits. Maybe he does. Maybe the PBC does. But Showtime, they don't see none of that. They don't see nothing from that. So what I'm wondering is if Stephan Espinoza would have known all those months, hell, upwards of a year, 2 years, because Stephan Espinoza has been all in the mix of the Kool-Aid. He's been all in the mix of the conversation in regards to Wilder, in regards to Joshua, in regards to where the fight lands. He has been enthralled in that, so much so that he became more semblant of a boxing promoter as opposed to a network executive. I highlighted this in the past, and I don't think anybody noticed it, that you got Stephan Espinoza arguing with people on Twitter, on social media, doing interviews as if he's a boxing promoter when that's what he ain't. He ain't a boxing promoter, he's a network exec. But that's how knee-deep, how balls-deep he's been invested in Deontay Wilder, that this guy started looking more like a boxing promoter than a network executive. But if he would have known all those months ago, year, 2 years, if he would have known that Wilder might end up fighting on Fox instead of Showtime, do you think he would have been as involved? Do you think he would have exhausted as many of Showtime's resources to keep that fighter on their side of the street? Do you think he would have did all these things if he knew that Wilder still might end up fighting on another network? I don't think he would have tried as hard. No, I don't think he would have been in the mix of the conversation as much as he has been if he would have known that at some point Wilder's gonna ditch you guys, man. That's what's gonna happen, you know? I don't think so. And that's how it's looking. I mean, all signs are pointing to Wilder versus Ortiz 2 landing on Fox. That's what it's looking like, for obvious reasons. That Fox is a much bigger network than Showtime, that reaches more homes than Showtime, so they can get many times over the exposure fighting on Fox that they would have got fighting on Showtime. They can get double, triple the exposure. So it's obvious as to why it's happening, but it's also obvious that Stefan Espinoza didn't see this coming, nor could he have. He couldn't have. He couldn't have predicted that the PBC is going to form a partnership with an even bigger network than Showtime, and as a result of that, Showtime's going to end up getting deprioritized and put on the back burner. That relationship, and I've said it before, has grown all but obsolete. It's just a funny turn of events because, you know, Stefan Espinoza, he made his feelings very clear that Deontay Wilder is the centerpiece of their boxing programming, and they want to get back to making the big fights for that fighter. It's not a question of whether or not Showtime was invested in Deontay Wilder, and it's not a question of if they're in the Deontay Wilder business or they have been, because they very much have. But it seems that the proverbial rug has been swept from under. Fox gets that Wilder versus Ortiz rematch. That's a proverbial dildo up Showtime's proverbial ass, because they will have been fucked.
In other news, the World Boxing Super Series heavyweights are being eyed for 2020. Portion of the article reads, heavyweight is one of 4 divisions under consideration for Series 3 of the 8-man knockout event, which is likely to begin in February.
And it's not just the big boys that they're looking at. They're looking at several weight classes. Under consideration for the next series is heavyweight, middleweight, super flyweight, and 1 women's division. A change to the scheduling will see the series run in 1 calendar year, with the first round likely taking place in February and the finals in November or December. So what do I think about all this? I like the first season of the World Boxing Super Series. I like the second season, and that season's not even over yet. There's still some great fights to come in regards to Season 2 of the World Boxing Super Series. So if they are now laying the groundwork for a 3rd season, and it's to include all these different weight classes, yeah, I like the sound of that. It's fan-fucking-tastic. It's ambitious. And, you know, the proposition that they may feature at least 1 women's division in the tournament, I very much like the sound of that. I really don't care which one. I mean, I got my preferences. I got certain weight classes that I'm looking at that I'd very much like to see the world champions and the contenders lock horns against each other. Super featherweight, the super featherweight division immediately comes to mind. There's a lot of talent in that weight class in terms of the world champions, in terms of the contenders, the girls that got belts and the girls that don't but want to, you know? You're talking about your Eva Wallstrom, your Maiva Hamadouche, your Hyun Mi Choi, your Eva Brotnika. Lots of good fighters in that fucking weight class, whether they got belts or not. I think that would be a fantastic addition to the World Boxing Super Series. But there is also the junior middleweight division, where Clarissa Shields is going. You know, there's lots of fighters in that division that need a profile boost, that need the exposure. Fighters like Eva Pietrzkowska, the WBC champion. Fighters like Marie-Eve Decker, the IBF champion. Now, Hannah Gabriels, the WBA champion. The American public has more or less already acquainted itself with her, but they haven't seen her since. They haven't really seen much of Hannah since that Clarissa Shields fight. And one way for her to reacquaint herself with them is if, you know, that division just so happens to pop up in the World Boxing Super Series in that tournament. I'll say that it could be virtually any division. It could be any division from super featherweight to junior middleweight to lightweight, because you know what? There's a lot of talented girls in the lightweight division too. I mean, there's lots of talent to go around when it comes to women's boxing. So just about any division would suffice. But
you know, I do like the super featherweight division for the tournament. I feel that given the fighters that are there, there's a higher likelihood of getting fan-friendly fights that the fans will remember if it's the super featherweight division. But right now, you know, it's in the air. We'll see what happens. We'll see which division it is, if it's any division at all. In regards to the other proposed weight classes for the tournament, you know, they mentioned middleweight. Lots of good fighters in that weight class. But at the end of the day, you have to wonder, you know, in a weight class that actually has 2 cash cows, it's not very likely that a name like Canelo Alvarez participates in a tournament. He don't need to do that. What about a Gennady Golovkin? What are the odds that we could see a name like that participating in the World Boxing Super Series? Well, as much as I'd like to see it, I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. In all honesty, I'm not. You know, even if he becomes the IBF champion and he beats Sergey Didivinchenko, I can't see a guy with a name like Golovkin's participating in a tournament. You know, the tournament format, it's great. But a name like that, a name that's got some weight to it, you know, that's got some marquee value, they may not want to commit to a tournament format. They may want to keep their options open to pursue what big fights become available. So I can't really see a Canelo or a Golovkin participating in the World Boxing Super Series. Now, a name that I can see participating in it is the name of Demetrius Andrade. I could see that happening, and I could see it happening because Demetrius, in spite of being a 2-division champion, having been a champion in junior middleweight and middleweight, he still needs a profile boost. He still needs to get out there on a regular basis and show people just how talented he is. And you know, the World Boxing Super Series will afford him enough opponent options because it's a tournament format. It will afford him enough opportunity to do that, to get out there and show his shit. Thing is that he might actually be the only world champion in that division that participates in the tournament. I mean, Jamal Charlo, he's got the green belt, but what are the odds that he's going to cross the street to participate in the World Boxing Super Series? What are the odds that Al Heyman and all the PBC kids would even let him do that, you know? I know that this is a guy that doesn't have very many opponent options. I mean, look at who he's fighting next. He's fighting Dennis Hogan. Nothing against Dennis Hogan. It's not that he's a bad fighter, but that does denote that Jamal Charlo, given the PBC's business practices, their fractured relationships with just about everybody, that opponent option denotes what I'm talking about. That they don't have the relationships with a Top Rank, the relationships with a Matchroom or a Golden Boy to keep some of their guys in some of their weight classes in titillating fights. So I'm not holding my breath to see a Jamal Charlo participate in the World Boxing Super Series. I don't think it's likely. We look at the other weight classes that they talked about. Now, you know, Superfly, I could definitely see that happening. It's a great weight class, a lot of talent. But aside from Superfly, the idea that the very next World Boxing Super Series could feature the big men, let's talk about that. It's pretty obvious that, you know, the tournament format, it's a great format, but it goes back to what I said before about a name like Canelo or a name like Golovkin. When it comes to the bigger names in the heavyweight division, your Deontay Wilder, the winner of Joshua versus Ruiz, Tyson Fury, none of these guys are the kind of guys that are very likely to participate in a tournament because they, like a Canelo, like a Golovkin, they're going to want to keep their options open. You know, they got stuff to do. They do. They don't have the time to make a commitment to a tournament format. So does that then mean that a heavyweight tournament is a wash? Hell fucking no. Hell no. No. The land of the big men captivates people's attention in a way that some other weight classes don't. So you don't necessarily need world champions for the tournament itself to be a big hit, to be successful. If you can get a Derek Chisora, if you can get a Dillian White, a Joseph Parker, you know, these guys, if you can get these kinds of guys,
among several others,
Agit Kabayel, Michael Hunter.
Those are good guys.
If you can get these kinds of guys to participate, you'd still end up with a pretty damn good tournament. I mean, you would. And at the end of the day, the bigger names at the weight have so many commitments that they're already engaged to that all these other guys that are out there, they're going to have to keep busy with something. They're going to have to keep busy with someone. So why not join a tournament format just, you know, to pass the time and continue to build your profile? So just because there may not be any world titleists in a heavyweight tournament, that doesn't mean that it'd be a wash. That doesn't mean that it would be a bad tournament or it wouldn't be worth watching. It would still very much have the possibility of shelling out great fights. But who do I think is more likely to join the tournament? You know, I could see the winner of Chisora versus Parker, for example. I could see the winner of that fight participating in the tournament. I could see Dillian White participating in the tournament. I could see that. Michael Hunter? Definitely. But you know, they mentioned Daniel Dubois, and I can't see that happening. I can't see old Fish Eyes letting one of his star prospects participating in such a tournament. I can't see it. I can't. I mean, that pretty much goes for most of what BT Sport, Queensberry Promotions, most of those guys that are on that side of the street, your Daniel Dubois, your Joe Joyce, your Tyson Fury, I can't see those kinds of guys joining the tournament. I don't see that happening. But some of Matchroom's guys, oh yeah, I could definitely see that. I could see that. So while there are some names that I think aren't very likely to participate, there are a few I can think of that might. One is, the name of Nathan Gorman. If there's anybody on the Queensberry promotion side of things that I think is a realistic option to join this tournament, it would be the name of Nathan Gorman. It would offer him the chance for redemption. A name on the PBC side of things that I would like to see participate is the name of F.A. Ajagba. F.A. shows a lot of promise, great power, great dimensions, great athleticism. I'd love to see him participate in this thing. I don't know how likely it is because he's a PBC guy and we all know what their reputation is, but I'd still like to see it. And I think it would be a prime opportunity for him to show his shit while not being in the background of someone else's card, of someone else's event. So let's see what happens. Let's see how the cookie crumbles once it's out of the package.